Everyone, welcome to Mentium Matters podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I'm Megan Cummings Kruger, and today we're going to be focused on the power of perspective in mentoring and in life. Marcel Proust observed that the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And this ability to reframe how we see things is, of course, particularly relevant right now, as we all seek to respond to an almost overwhelming collection of complex challenges. My guest is Kimberly Strong, who brings to this conversation over 20 years of experience in human resources as a C-suite and executive leader in organizations such as Target Corporation, as well as being the founder and CEO of the well-named Strong Connection, which was created to advise companies on championing diversity in the workplace and aligning people and business strategy. Kimberly also devotes time as a speaker at industry conferences, and she is active in Pipeline Angels, where she is proud to support women and non-binary femmes by investing in and advising startups. Kim received her Bachelor of Business Administration Management from Howard University, and she currently resides with her husband in Atlanta, Georgia, and is the proud parent to a son and stepson. Kim joined the Mentium community as a mentor in our pilot of the Momentum program and has continued to mentor with us ever since. She also mentors for a number of other organizations and boards. So we are delighted to have her as a mentoring partner, and we are delighted to have her as our guest today. Welcome, Kim.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm really glad to be here today.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start out with a question that I know so often you are asked, and that is, as a Black woman who has held a number of C-suite and executive roles over the course of your career, can you share with us, how did you get there?
You know, the great thing about my journey is it wasn't as planned out as I thought. So coming from a family, originally from Detroit, a proud daughter of two Detroit public school teachers, retired public school teachers. And most of my family, I always say when we hear people talk about generations, you hear first generation to go to college. Actually, I'm third generation college in my family. Now, here's the kind of the switch on this is my family's either educators or physicians. Not a bad place to be. I didn't see myself in corporate. So I always thought I wanted to be an educator. But then all of a sudden people started, when I went to Howard, I ended up switching schools. I was in School of Liberal Arts, but then I switched over to School of Business. And it really opened my mind to different things that I didn't even know was available to me. And also when recruiters would come, I would see people who looked like me. And so I thought, well, maybe business is where I wanted to go into. And then someone started talking to me about human resources. And I really thought, because mainly if they were there, I would talk and learn about it. During my time, human resources wasn't a position you could just come into right out of college. You had to work your way there. And so when I was recruited, at the time, it was called Dayton Hudson Corporation, not Target Corporation, but I was recruited into being a manager. And I have to say, it was the best experience I ever had. So I did learn the business piece. And then eventually, I always kept my forefront on being human resources. So I got into human resources, really worked my way through. And then ironically, when you mentioned me being a part of the pilot program for Mentium, actually, I was a mentee of Mentium when I was a regional human resource manager for, then it was the department store division of Target Corporation, Marshall Fields. And I was asked to be a mentee. And I got to tell you, it was the proudest day of my life because it just really taught me and told me at the same time that they valued me. And I didn't know I was being taught that people want to feel valued, but I was just proud to be a part of it. So I was a mentee at that time. And so I was really excited. And that was really my first introduction to Mentium. But I think having someone and learning from the business for mentoring, because my parents, they could tell me a lot, but you know, as an educator, and even as a physician during that time, and even still today, I mean, there's not travel, there's not all this stuff that goes on. So I just remember my mom always saying, Kim, where did you travel to today? Because I was usually going to some different state or even just in Michigan. I went to Traverse City and she was like, how was it? So that was always funny. So I always had this routine of bringing every magnet back from wherever I went to show where I went because, back then we didn't have, I had to use an almanac, or, I was like reading maps to get to places, and it was just fun for my family because I was the first one in business who really did as much travel as I did. So it was always like, you rented a car? I mean, and those are little things that you just don't think about,
Yeah.
during that time. So it was just, I had to learn through others about how to, balance that in terms of being a part of the business, understanding the business acumen, which really wasn't, I didn't see in my lifetime. And so mentorships really helped me through that. People who were in business really helped me through that.
Absolutely. And when I was listening to you, I was thinking about how, because I know we've spoken a number of times in the past, and how really you have evolved into education of a different form in all the work that you do. So I'd like to follow up. We talk often at Mentium about how learning happens at the point of difference. So the power of mentoring comes from seeing through someone else's eyes. You have mentored both with Mentium, but also wherever you have been. You've mentored so many mentees in your life. Have you found that there's any consistent themes that you've seen from your mentees?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different buckets. I see like there's quite a few that I would say, let's say the entry level mentee, the ones that are just really starting out their career and they just want to go fast and go real fast. And so I'm always like, let's slow down. Let's look at your resume. Let's see what is the plan. Where do you want to ultimately be? What is the destination? And then let's kind of work backwards from that and see what kind of experiences you can have being in that you need for that to get, ultimate position you want to, or they think they want to, because we know a lot of things can change over time. So once I look at that and we kind of work through it, there's times where I could see they get frustrated. Oh, it's moving too slow. I don't think I like it here. I just want to up and leave. And I'm like, no, because your resume is a story. So let's work through the story of your resume and make sure we understand that. So that's an aha moment for them. And I would say and that's really the entry level type person that I work with. What I realize in terms of the mentees that I've had through Mentium, they're on more the senior level side, like probably budding. Their trajectory is to be an officer of their company, a SVP or EVP. And what I see with them is that they've been so focused on their job, which is great because you got to do the job to get promoted or get even selected to be a Mentium. So I think they feel that same joy I felt of when they're selected to be a part of Mentium, and like, oh wow. And then the pressure sets in, like, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to, do anything wrong because everybody's expecting me to, get through this. And then when we go through it, it's just kind of aha moment when I realize they're so awesome at their job and some huge strategic position that they have and what they do. I'm just really amazed. But they don't use that same mindset for their career trajectory. And when I kind of start saying, so what's your plan? Let's go through it. Treat it like it's your plan that you would have for, you're going to present to your director or VP. And once they see that, it's like this, I love when the light bulb comes on and they go, oh my goodness, all this time, I see what you're saying. Like, yes, you have to plan it out. And what do you really want? And that's always the fun time. It's just really, they realize that they need to treat even the mentee mentor relationship more strategically than they thought. I think they think it has to be something totally different, but it's like, what do you do on a regular? How do you approach someone? What do you do to network? And so those are fun moments to, work with them to fine tune that. And even the last year I had to learn together in terms of how to fine tune it through a more virtual setting. than ever in the past with other mentees. It's just, I would always say, the other types of networking that would work. But this time it was totally different, which was fun for me again, because I got to learn something new in terms of my mentoring style as well.
It's so interesting because we so often talk about how holistic it is to have a year-long mentoring partnership, but you've also taken an interesting angle on that as far as being strategic, not just with the role that you have, but with your career. So it's kind of another aspect of that holistic nature of a mentoring partnership. So thinking about continuing to focus on perspective, what about yourself? Has there been a consistent lens through which you've viewed your work, would you say?
Yeah, I would say, a lot of times it was just through, especially with DEI work, I think you have to really meet people where they are. There was times where, you just, well, you want to assume that everybody's on the same page, and we're not on all topics of the spectrum in terms of working with DEI, because there's so many different things out there. So it's a one-on-one conversation, especially in organizations and with the consulting I do, just really helping people understand how do they benefit? What's in it for them? I didn't want to use that kind of scenario of everybody use that what's in it for me, but it really is. It's just seeing like, okay, tell me on my baseline, how does this affect me? And I think once you get to help them understand how it affects them, also what role they can play, because I think sometimes we take too big a piece and saying, oh, we have to do all of this. Well, no, some people might have to do more than others, but tell people how they fit into the piece of it. Because I think sometimes we go too high in an organization, because most higher up, if they're at C-suite, the CEO, they know it's important because of just the number of eyes that are on it. There's a lot of reasons why they're going to really look at it, but to really trickle down to, the main people who make things happen, is just really having them understand how it affects them, especially that middle manager who is really the key to making it happen. And so just really helping them, everyone. I mean, so no one is excluded. Just how does everyone fit into that picture, and letting them understand what their role is to contributing to that vision and where they need to be. But I think it's just so important that people really understand what role they play, because we can't boil the ocean. We have to start somewhere. And I think that's the part sometimes we miss.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the benefit of having had a number of conversations with you. And so I know one aspect that is such a unique strength of yours truly is how you are able to meet people where they are. I mean, we all know we should. It's a very different animal to actually be able to do that. And you maintain this level of positivity, or assuming positive intent, let's say, when you are trying to meet people where they are. And so I'm wondering, is there any story or example that comes to mind of someone where you flexed a little to meet them where they were, and were able to kind of shift that perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the things is I always say, and I know I probably even, this might be part of something I'll say later on. We'll go more into it. But I just try not to ever burn a bridge. So I said, I try to stay connected, and I really try to keep that connection. If it's through tools like LinkedIn or Twitter, just Instagram. I'm not a big Instagrammer yet. I know that's my one thing that's I feel like I got to get by 2022. But at least they know I'm observing. I like it. I'm just not out there. I tweet more than that. But then LinkedIn. And so really using those tools. So a lot of times in terms of, like you said, meeting people where they are, I really try to connect people. So I have this trick I used to do pre-pandemic. Is just look through my LinkedIn and my Facebook and see whatever town I was going in, because I still I traveled a lot up until 2020, but I just see who's in town. And I just decided I just email, or go tweet, or whoever, just send a message like, hey, if you're available, I'll be at this hotel lobby at this time, and come. And I gotta tell you, it was the best thing I ever did. I started it back in, I think, 2015. and really did it up until 2020. But it was just so much fun because I wasn't sure who was going to show up, and then I would end up making friends with other. They would make friends with each other. So I was kind of creating this like cohort in terms of where I met, and so sometimes that helps. It just when people see that you're genuinely interested, and you have when they would see different people. I mean, the people who would attend are totally different, and they're like, oh wow, I didn't know you were interested in this or interested in that. And so it was just a great way of showing that connection and making people feel comfortable. And that's the one thing I do miss, because that was a lot of fun, because I never knew who would show up and rekindle the friendships and everything that I had. But also I love the idea of creating new friends toward each other.
That's the word I was thinking of when you were sharing that story, is creating those connections, which
Hmm.
are just never been more valuable, again, holistically, professionally, but most especially personally these
Yeah.
days. And what about also, again, being a black woman who is dealing at the executive level, C-suite level, when it comes to that DEI work and being able to meet people where they are and affect a bit of a perspective shift, what have you found that's been helpful for you?
I think, telling your story, and my story is that I think people assume we're all the same. And then when I'm, from Detroit, and, it was interesting. It was a C-suite client I was working with. And it was funny. We went to dueling high schools. Well, actually, it wasn't high schools. It was just a school that had K through 12, but I went through K through 9. And I noticed she went through the rival school that was K through 12 as well. And so it was just when you kind of break down those barriers, because when I told her what school I went to, I could see she shifted, because to be honest, the school I went to, it was probably 5 blacks at the school. It was a private school, but I knew she went, and her father was a very powerful CEO, no longer a CEO, but a past CEO. And I knew of her father. And so it was just funny, because when she said what school, and I was like, oh, I went to such and such. And so it was just, and I could tell like her whole vibe changed with me. And it was just easier. And this was on a topic of DEI. So it was easier for me to even talk to her, because we found something in common. So a lot of times my search is always to try to find something in common with somebody. That's what makes me sad about wearing a mask on an airplane, because I'm that one who tries to talk, because sometimes I try to play a game of how long is it going to take me to find out this person sitting next to me and I have something in common that they would have never thought we had in common. And I've done that. That's a game I when I'm awake I like to play, because it just makes it fun, because I always try to break down the barrier. And I did this years ago. I mean, I've always done that. So it wasn't something that's new, and what people think happened just in a year. No, it's something I've always done, because I always laugh after I get off a plane and go, haha, I bet you they never thought I would be the one they'd have that much in common with.
I remember you sharing that story, and I was hoping you'd share it again because I
Oh,
just think it's such a great, positive, and simple action. And I think it's both. You're looking for that commonality in the moment, but then also I really appreciate how you prepare. You know, how if you know you're meeting with someone, you do a little research, and so you come armed with that connection, and how that can sometimes open doors. So just great habits. So how do you see leadership changing in response to the challenges that we're all facing with this pandemic?
the ones I've personally seen. So I can't speak for the whole industry or whatever is going on, but just personally, just the ones I've seen, and being a part of a couple of organizations that we've had calls all through this time, and just hearing and being with some clients. Definitely senior leaders are listening, and not that they didn't listen before, they just had to listen in a different way. And I think having, take it more than a year ago now, but in March, when everybody realized they had to switch to remote, when in my working in corporate, remote was, I had people on my team who did work remotely a few days a week, because it was the exception. Like, you just approved it and you just knew, and they did it. I, myself. There's a couple of times I've never always worked through my career in the same city as my office was. I was somewhere else, but normally I would just go to a remote office, never like I was always working remotely home. But then later I started doing that because it was just a lot easier and my boss approved it. So because I flew everywhere, so usually I'm working remote out of a hotel, not necessarily home, but it was just easier to take meetings from a hotel if I wasn't there. But I think leaders are starting to see that flexibility. So when we were going through that, I think everybody's like, oh, we got to work remote. In some cases, I heard stories that was sad that some people realized maybe they didn't even have a permanent home. I mean, I don't think that clicked to everybody because they would go into work. You weren't sure what their backstory was. So I think that opened a lot of eyes that I heard of some leaders talk about, like, oh my goodness, Kim, I didn't even, I was this instant of not knowing they really didn't have a place for us to come put some of the furniture in. So that was an issue. I also heard some stories where, especially during those early times of Zoom, you're on the phone, and I think you probably remember the days like it was that long ago. It was only like February of 2020, but if you were on a call and your child walked in or the dog was barking, you would give those eyes going. Cause I know I would give those mama eyes back in the day, like get out of the room when I had small children or when my dog would bark or when a certain packaging company will ring my bell. Like no one rings bells anymore, but you would just be like, ah, or the lawnmower is going. Now we're like, whatever. I mean, you just can't be there. But I remember, hearing the story from a friend, and she was saying she was on a call, and the baby, her daughter was just crying, and she was like, "You have permission to pick her up," but she had to wait. She was waiting for that permission, which I think more companies are understanding now. No, if the baby comes in the picture, in the view of the camera, it's okay. If your dog is barking or cat, I've seen a lot of cattails walk across the thing. We don't get all flooded, but I just laugh at how we could be so anxious about that. And I think leaders have understood that. I think they're being more sensitive to people understanding that they're not ready to go back in. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of companies change. I think a lot of people were thinking after Labor Day, and now I'm seeing the trend of it going to after the first of the year. And then also adding the flexibility of saying, some companies are saying you can be remote as long as it works with your business, you can do it all the time. Or, you have flexibility to do it within your days, which is going to be so helpful because I think so many times, and I'll be honest with Mentium, I know a lot of times my superpower that you would use was that I worked remotely a lot before all of this. So that was kind of my superpower, that you would give me other people who wanted to know how to work that. And now I laugh because when we've talked, my mentee and I might have talked after, we were like, everybody, you're on the same level now. So we got to we got to move to the next thing. Because I mean, that's not an issue anymore. I think no one will ever question your work or anything being remote, because now everyone's doing it and everyone had to prove that they could still be just as effective being remote.
And it really was such a shift in perspective. I mean, it really forced all of us to see the whole person.
Mhm.
You did see them in the house with the kid and the cattail, but also recognizing you don't know what you don't know.
Right. And can I share a couple of more stories that I thought were a
Please.
little interesting? I think people started to rely on their employee resource groups more, because those specific groups, because they had such, they were the expert on certain things within their whatever they were working on. And those organizations were able to give more information. And then I noticed some companies, there's a couple of companies I had to start, I helped them build a resource group because they didn't even have it. So they didn't even have that intel, that inside intel that they could have had. So that was a selling point to say, you need those types of groups because it really helped. And especially the ones that I saw really came forward was especially, the disability, because that was a lot of groups that really gave information, because they found out when they were remote, a lot of people didn't have accessibility to the thing. So they were very integral in helping that. And I think on sadly communication pieces, changing communication. There were stories I heard where in communication, you couldn't just tell the employees like, okay, EAP, this is what you need to do if you have any of these things. But you have to think there are some people who are put into a situation in terms of maybe a domestic violence situation. Now they can't go to work to get away from it for a couple of hours. Now they're there all day. So putting in a text number versus just calling, because maybe they couldn't call if they needed help. So it really changed the way how we communicated, how we did a lot of things, because we had to think of everything when we weren't in a certain building, and realizing that some workplaces are sanctuaries for people.
Definitely. Definitely. It reminds me of a documentary I just saw recently called This Changes Everything. And it was focused on women. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh,
Women in female directors and women writers in the world of media, movies and TV shows and the like. But one of the things they were saying is the power of numbers. You've got to track this stuff to be able to really make a persuasive argument. And that there had been a lot of arguments prior to this about the need for diversity of perspective.
mhm.
Uh, but the headway they made once they had numbers was incredible.
That's great. I'm gonna make sure I check it out.
So when you think about your career, and again now you have a lot of energy and focus in a lot of different areas now, so across now, throughout your career, what habits come to your mind that you really feel contributed to your success?
Sure. I think one thing I finally found the title, and it's always a Kim. It's another Kim who I'll shout her out, but it was a friend of mine, Kim, and she said she calls it a portfolio lifestyle. So that's she gave me this term, a portfolio lifestyle, because I do dabble. At first, I was like, how do I say? Because I'd like to do a lot of different things now. So it's a portfolio lifestyle. But I think some of the habits that have gotten me here and what I continue to use is, first of all, I try to be respectful of people's time, because I learned that just entering into the workforce is just being on time, being respectful of people's time. I would say my husband would say I don't do that personally as much as professionally. So he used to get on me on that one. He'd be like, how come you don't treat it the same? So I'm still a work in progress on that one. I'm just saying. But really just being understanding people's time. And when you say you're going to, but it also fits into my next one is when you say you're going to do something, do it, follow up. I think there was a time where someone even nicknamed me the follow-up queen, because even if I didn't get that full action done, I always got back with them to say what was gonna happen or what was I, planned to do. But at least I followed up. And I think a lot of people always respected me on that. There's a caveat to that. Is sometimes what you're following up, sometimes maybe I didn't need to follow up on it. So just say no. It was the power of no too. Because some things I was following up and then I look at myself like, why am I doing this? So it's a balance. So follow up where you really know it's important for yourself to follow up. But if you're just doing stuff just to do, just sometimes you might have to take something off your plate. Just understand how to balance that. And that's something I always tell my mentees, to understand that part of it, because sometimes I was saying yes way too much. So doing that. And then I know this is going to sound so funny for me, who I'm a pop culture guru, but really no gossip. People trust me. I don't repeat anything. Being an HR, when I was in the HR world, of course, I have to, if there's something that is definitely a violation of policy or something like that. And I always tell someone when they say, can you not say anything? I was like, okay, based on this contingency, if there's something I need to report, I'm going to have to, but at least I would let them know. But when people confidentiality, especially mentoring, you can't talk about things to other people. So that was always my goal. And I think people always knew that. And even till this day, there's people I've worked with years and they still might call me and share something with me. And they know it's with me, it's locked and loaded. And so I've always prided myself, because I just know I wouldn't gotten as far as they knew I was like, the gossip girl. No pun intended.
Absolutely. And so,
just one more thing, because I meant to say
yes.
on the no gossip, because putting it into really current day, this is something I do too. I do not post anything on social media unless I ask. So I wanted to put that in for social, because now there's a whole different world of social media and things. And sometimes people just, you want to enjoy a moment. If I'm out with someone business wise, I'm not the posting. I will ask if it's something like we say, oh, you want to take a picture or a selfie? But I think they respect that. They'll ask, can I post this? And I will say, may I post this? So that's something I really, especially in this day and age, I want to be particular, because I've seen a lot of people have to backtrack and apologize because they posted something they shouldn't have.
I think that I'm really glad you followed up with that point, because that's certainly part of the etiquette that hasn't really, the rules that haven't really caught up to where we are with technology. And that is such an important point and something to think about.
Yeah.
Anything else as far as words of advice you'd love to pass on to leaders? Part of what we love about this podcast is this is your opportunity to share what you'd like to our audience, to our leaders, to fellow mentors.
Sure. I think, one of the things, the way I looked at it and looking back is like, what would I tell my younger self? And
Yes.
and looking through that, I would say enjoy the journey more. I think I got so cut up on like, I want to get to this level. I want to get to that next level, and just really enjoying where you are. And I think today's, even like just working with some of these really new entry, like just out of college, they get it more than I ever did. I took it so seriously, and I feel really bad because now with the way the times are, I mean, the travel piece, like, like, oh, I'm just going to take a gap year and go travel here. I mean, I would have never thought of doing anything like that. And now I'm like, wow, they had the right idea. So I just feel enjoy the journey more, definitely have a plan to like kind of have an outline of where you want to go, because that always helps. You don't want to, spend, just really kind of understand where that destination is going to be. But don't take it so hard when it doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to be, because sometimes I have planned, my life so hard that like, oh, I can't have this happen because that's not how I planned it. When I was asked to relocate to California, oh, I was like, no, I would live in Detroit for the rest of my life. Like, I just didn't think that would ever happen. And my husband's like, if you want to be married with me, we're moving to California. You got to figure it. And it was the best thing I ever did was, to move to California. And then I ended up moving total of 9 times in my career, but I enjoyed, I realized like, oh, okay. So at least I opened myself up to that. But I think it's just enjoying more. Don't overpromise. And I mean, and this is not with the work. This is more in the personal, because I would do these silly things when my son, and I have to say, I know I have one biological son, my son, and I have a stepson. So he is with us. Technically I have 2. I really, when looking at my life, but there was a couple of times where I would try to pretend that they had a children's parent teacher conference, and I would tell my husband, this is when we were in California, because that's when they were younger. And I was like, oh, no problem. I'm going to visit stores in, Arizona. We'll be back by that time. I'll be there. Don't worry. Why did I do that? My husband would have rather me say, no, I'm not going to make it because I have a flight that's not going to get back in time. And I would do stuff like that. So therefore I would disappoint them, because what flight ever runs on time? So of course, and I thought I had it planned that, okay, I get on the flight, I land, get in the car, run to the school. It never worked out that way. There was, delays and everything. And I just never accounted for all of that. And so my family did sit me down one time and said, my husband and my sons were like, Mom, just say no. You can't make it. It's okay. And I was trying to be the super mom and doing it all. And I would say to those mothers out there, when I was a little different, you just go around, well, most were back in school, but still, it's just those things of just, it's okay to say, I'm not going to make the parent teacher conference, or tell your job, I can't make that trip because I got to go to this parent teacher conference. I was trying to play all sides. That doesn't work. So I would say, don't over promise on, and mainly on your family side, because I think we do very well with our work. We get the deadlines, we do all that, and sometimes we let the personal down, the personal people down. And then sometimes you don't even remember. There was times where I don't even remember why I missed a certain event in my child's life. So reflecting back on it, if it's important for you to be there, there's a lot of mentees who sometimes call me like, the meeting I have with, a team is the first day of kindergarten. And that is my ultimate rule. You do not ever miss the first day of kindergarten, no matter what. You go to your boss and you tell them it's the first day of kindergarten, because you'll never ever get that back. So that's always like my number one thing, because they were struck by it. I think everybody's eased up a little bit this, over 2020, but that used to be a huge point of just stress for some of my mentees in terms of doing that. And I think that's it. I wanted to make sure if I had everything that I wanted to uh, tell you. But yeah, I think everything has changed. Just thankfully, a lot of things have eased its way out versus those old ways that I had to go through. But just be true to yourself, be true to your family, over communicate with your family, over communicate, because as travel starts to pick up, there are times where I forget and tell my husband, oh, by the way, tomorrow I'm supposed to be in Boston or something. He just look at me like, I think you probably knew this a long time ago, but you're just telling me. So over communicate. That was the younger me, but so that's why I said, tell the younger, like, over communicate to your husband, spouse, whoever, your partner, just over communicate to let them know your plans and have a calendar.
I think that over communicate, I think you should do that in all parts of your world. You cannot do that enough, because always our inclination for whatever reason is not to communicate enough. And rarely is someone going to say, stop communicating.
So true. Yeah.
Right, so then I want to close with this last question, and that is, because I like to ask all of our speakers, do you have a favorite quote or saying? I'm a collector of quotes, and so I always like to hear what's of value to others.
Yeah, the one I've always used and given to each of you, you can ask the mentees from Mentium, but I use it with everyone. My favorite is Maya Angelou, and it's, and I'm sure everybody's heard it, but it's so true. If you didn't know it was her, it was her. But people will forget what you say, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's always my goal, is to make people know that I listened, I heard them, I cared, and that they always have, when they think of my name, it's like, oh, like it's like a smile comes over their face.
I love that. Well, and I have to tell you, of all the quotes, and again, I am a collector of quotes, that quote of Maya's is my favorite one. I think it captures mentoring's essence the best of any quote I've heard. So I love that that is your favorite.
Oh, great.
Kim, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all of your experiences and sharing that perspective and the power of being able to shift perspective. All of us in this time, we're having so much perspective shifting going on. And so thinking about how to do it intentionally, thinking about what a difference it can make, kind of harnessing it, I think is such a relevant topic these days.
Great.
So I want to thank all of you who've been listening to this Mentium Matters podcast. We have a number of excellent guests like Kim. So do make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And know that for additional resources, you can find some show notes on the Mentium website as well. We look forward to having all of you join us next time.